the McGill Philosophy Podcast. I'm Dax Avery Hamouth, and today I'm interviewing my friend Sarah, who works in philosophy of friendship and philosophy of women. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, Dax. Thank you for having me. It's lovely to be here.
Excellent. So just to get started, maybe you want to tell us a bit about what does it mean to do philosophy of women, philosophy of friendship?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. What it means to me, I started this project getting very mushy-gushy about friendships and what role were they playing in my life. So I was doing, at the time, a bit of a dive into early modern historical works. I was looking at folks like Margaret Cavendish, Mary Astell. What I'm noticing a theme in their work is that they tend to cloister women in these private gendered spaces. And what happens is then when women are placed or situated in these spaces, suddenly they can do philosophy, they can write poetry, be good orators, things of the sorts, which they otherwise aren't able to do outside of this in the early modern period. And I thought this was a really interesting theme that was going on here. So I wanted to look at what is the role of friendship between women, specifically in these historical texts. And I wonder if something similar could be said today. So is there something unique about friendships that allows us in some way, shape, or form to be more, to use a big philosophical word, to be more autonomous? I want to say there's something special about friendship. I'm not sure what that is yet, but maybe in 5 years I'll have an answer. Stay tuned.
So it's not that you do philosophy of women, philosophy of friendship separately, but you're actually interested in how these two things overlap. Is that right?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think I see it sort of at the intersection of the history of philosophy of feminism, and there's a sort of epistemic project there, I think. So yeah, it's at a neat intersection between a couple of areas of philosophy, it's a lot of fun.
Right. And how did you come to do that, right? It's an interesting subdivision of philosophy, and especially those two things specifically don't necessarily always go together, philosophy of friendship, philosophy of women. So maybe can you tell me a bit about the history of how you got to do that?
Oh, how did I get here? Yeah.
And maybe if you can say something about getting to McGill specifically as well.
Absolutely. So I previously, before coming to McGill, I did my MA at McMaster, so you can call it like a McMaster's, if you will. It was a really, really wonderful 2 years. I had the privilege of taking a class with Lauren Samantha Forbes, who was my MA supervisor. And the course was on sort of exploring the works of Margaret Cavendish. And I thought there was something quite interesting about the course in that it wasn't typically how philosophy was studied. At least my experience in philosophy has been you go in and you read the canonical text. So you're reading folks like Kant, Hegel, Aristotle, Plato, and they're these really big, dense texts. But we get into this course and we're reading Margaret Cavendish's philosophy found in poetry, in plays, in letters, in scientific observations. So there's something really appealing about that. And so I had wrote a paper on what is the role of friendship in Margaret Cavendish's works. And that was all good and well. And then I had spent a bit of time in Australia after I finished this paper. I'd worked with Jackie Broad there, also a wonderful, wonderful Astell scholar. And she had helped me develop this project a bit further. It's coming up on the time to apply for PhD programs. So I'm looking around, and I think at the time I was looking to stay in Canada, and McGill has some really wonderful early modern scholars. So I had applied to McGill in hopes of working with these folks, but also very selfishly getting to live in Montreal. I think it's a very exciting place to live.
So McGill has specialists in early modern, more so than other places. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it's a good question. At least in the direction I think my project is going right now, it really fits in well with the work of Marguerite Delorier, Lisa Shapiro. They're working on the Extending New Narratives project. So how can we bring out these voices that have previously been excluded from the canon? The works of early modern women, I think, are especially relevant to that. So I really, really want to get involved in the work that they're doing. And it felt like a natural fit. So, yeah.
No, that's great. And you said something about so you applied to McGill. And
Yes.
you applied to McGill
Yep.
because you're interested in philosophy of friendship and women, and how these things come together, especially in the early modern period, which McGill has specialty in. That makes sense. But then you also said something about wanting selfishly to come to Montreal. Why is that selfish? What's special about Montreal and the situation of McGill?
That is an excellent question. I have had the privilege of living in a lot of different places. I've lived in Nova Scotia, Newfoundland, Alberta, Australia, Ontario. There's something about the city of Montreal that feels electric. It's got a beating heart to it. And I think it has this wonderful blend of francophones and anglophones. And it's not something I think you find elsewhere in Canada. And McGill specifically, I think, had a draw to it. I have a hard time putting a finger on what exactly that was. Maybe it's just intuition. My heart was in the right place. But yeah, I had met with Alex Carty prior to accepting the offer to McGill. And he had toured me around, which was very, very kind. And you get to see the campus, and I got to see it just as it's coming into summer. So it was a good time to see it. It's not Montreal winter. So yeah, I got a feel for the campus. I wish I had a better way to say it other than you know it because you feel it. It felt like I could call it home. So I think I knew that that's where my work was meant to be done. So yeah, I quite enjoyed the visit, and thank you, Carty, for that.
Right. So why did you feel so comfortable in McGill? Is it just the campus? Campus is beautiful, truly, probably the most beautiful in Canada and one of the most beautiful in North America, certainly.
Yes.
Was it just, do you think, the allure of the campus, or was there something about who you were or what you work on that also was a part of the draw? Or do you think it was just the setup of the university? Tell me a bit more.
Yeah. So when I think of academia, or perhaps when you think of academia, I picture the individual curled over their desk with a dusty lamp and dusty books, all on their own doing research. And while this may be the case for some, what I noticed about McGill specifically and with the philosophy department is there seemed to be a really vibrant community. So when I had come to meet with Alex, he had so kindly organized a hangout at Thompson House, which is the grad school hangout. And it felt like there was a community already set up there. And I was welcomed into that with open arms. So I think the philosophy community here specifically is really concerned with the work that they're doing, but equally as concerned with being connected with each other. That's what I think makes good philosophy happen, is good people.
That makes sense too with what you were saying earlier about liking Margaret Cavendish's more non-traditional styles of philosophy. I think there's also something here about the fact there's a certain sense in which you're not a traditional philosopher. Neither of us are, because we're not extremely old men with beards. There's definitely that stereotype. What is it like, do you think, for you being a woman in, we might say male dominated, but not just male dominated, but very masculinist discipline, probably the most outside of like mathematics or physics.
Sure. Yeah, it's a good question. One thing I'll share a bit of a personal anecdote first and foremost. So I just finished presenting my MA thesis a couple months ago, and it was on sort of a conceptual re-engineering of feminism. And one of the questions I get asked so often by men is, what about the men? I think there's even in the nature of the questions that are asked, in the nature of the work that is done, it can be difficult to locate yourself in that. So I think about, I was saying to you earlier, the kinds of things that are studied in classrooms. So you're looking at the canonical figures, Aristotle, Kant, Hegel, Plato, Socrates. What do they all have in common? They're all these canonical male figures doing philosophy. So I think in this sense, I found it a bit difficult to locate myself in their work and connect to the work in this way. Um, so yeah, maybe I'll leave it with that, is I find it can be difficult to locate and connect with certain kinds of work.
But you think McGill was more open or conducive to, you know, that particular positionality, being a woman in philosophy?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing I'd say about this is there is so much philosophy going on at McGill, and it's really, really wonderful and beautiful to see, like a nice stained glass painting. You have everything from, oh gosh, philosophy of video games to aesthetics to your ancients to feminist philosophy to French philosophy. There is so much going on that it seems like the opportunity to find somewhere where you fit in a certain kind of philosophy is, I guess, more present. So I think McGill has quite a lot to offer.
Right. And this makes sense. And I suppose in a certain sense, you say so, the McGill department's very diverse. So it caters to someone like your interests, where your interests are sort of crossing these two very different fields, philosophy of friendship, philosophy of women. Do you find that in general, your interests, especially in philosophy, tend to be like this, tend to straddle across very different or sort of non... You've talked a little bit about rejecting the canon, or not rejecting it, but wanting to think about things that lie outside the canon. Maybe could you talk about um, some other facets of your intellectual life which include this? I know, for instance, that you have a hobby of archaeology.
Yes.
How does that? And so you're very interdisciplinary.
Yeah,
How does that play into things?
First and foremost, burn the canon. Down with the canon. And
I object to this.
Yes, this is true. I think our philosophies are very in tension with each other. We fight a lot.
Truly.
Yeah, no, so I do archaeology on the side. After I'd finished my undergrad, I was moving in Nova Scotia. I was moving back to Ontario, and if you have had the privilege of doing this, of the forever dreaded Indeed job search, I'm applying for everything and anything that I could even marginally qualify for. So I saw there was an archaeology position. I could dig holes, I think. And maybe I had a bit too much confidence in myself, but I applied for the job, not expecting much to come of it. And then I got a job interview. And yeah, I ended up starting to work in archaeology that summer. And I really, really loved the work that I was doing. I found a lot of meaning in it in a way that I think nurtured my spirit in a very particular way. And so I ended up continuing it the following summer. And then I moved to Alberta last summer and I picked up archaeology there. I think it's been one of the most rewarding experiences I've had, not only in the folks that you meet, but the history that you're able to uncover. In a way, you're sort of telling a story. So you could come across an artifact that totally changes the canon. And I don't think there's many other disciplines quite like that. That being said, spending grueling days in 40-degree heat with no water can be some of the worst days of your life. But I found a lot of meaning in this. And it's something I hope to bring into my philosophical work at some point, the philosophy of archaeology, maybe.
Good. How do you see that influencing your work? If not directly, then in a more general sense.
Yeah. So
the archaeology, that is.
Yeah. I think in one sense, when you are in the middle of the woods digging holes for 10 hours a day, you have a lot of time to do philosophy. So that's been helpful. But I think in a more philosophical sense, I've thought a lot about what it means. I'll say this, what it means to do archaeology. And so if we accept it as a sort of storytelling, it seems like who the storyteller is, so who the archaeologist is, changes the way that the story is told. I think this is especially important when we're working on Indigenous sites. How does your standpoint influence the way that you can tell this story? I have a side project I'm working on with this right now. It is not fully cooked, but that's sort of the direction I'm thinking of.
Tell me about it.
Oh, yeah. Okay. So let's just say I am working on an Indigenous site as an archaeologist. How does my standpoint as a white woman doing archaeology on an Indigenous archaeological site, how does that influence the story that's told about what's uncovered? That's sort of the direction I'm thinking of taking it in. I don't have much more to offer right now. I think I gotta let it bake for a little longer, but that's kind of what I'm thinking.
And is this in any way related to your main work? Maybe could you say more about your main work?
Not at all. It is so separate. And I think in a way it's a nice break from doing the deep dive into dense historical texts that are often written in broken early modern English or French. I think there's something to be said about doing different kinds of philosophies. We tend to get sort of pigeonholed into a specialization, which is good and well, and this is important. But I think it often leads us to forget that there is so much philosophy has to offer. So
no, truly.
Yeah.
That's certainly right.
Yeah. And not to sound like a boomer, but I think it keeps me sharp.
Sure. But then, okay, so if it doesn't relate to your main work, could you tell me more about your main work?
Yes.
What is your main work? What does it mean to do philosophy of friendship in a way that straddles philosophy of women?
Good. Maybe I'll give an example. This was something I was thinking about. So let's just say you and I are in a philosophy seminar. It is you and I, and the rest of the table is men. And we are trying to give our thoughts on the text that's being read, on the questions that are being asked. But every time we do, we're cut off or we're interrupted. And we try to start again, we're cut off and we're interrupted. Just a sort of example here. And so we're thinking in our heads, like, is it something that I'm saying? I know I myself do this. I start to go into a bit of self-doubt. Is there something I'm saying? Is there, am I not cut out for this? Is there like a reason I'm being cut off? So you start to doubt yourself in a way. But then let's just say after the class, you and I go out and we grab our usual espresso and flat white. And we're yapping. I'm like, yeah, I don't know. Maybe I'm thinking about this in the wrong way, but how did you feel about this? We have a bit of back and forth. And we help each other to sort of recognize the reality of the situation. And it was the fact that, okay, we are women in this male-dominated philosophy seminar. That's probably the reason we're getting cut off here.
And so the friendship is just about sort of smoothing over each other's difficulties and sharing, or is there anything more sort of pragmatic or more utilitarian in the sense of changing things?
Yeah. So others have certainly paved the road for me to say this. So Natalie Stoljar and Katrina McKenzie work on relational autonomy. And
sorry, what is that?
Yeah, good. So it's how do our relationships with one another give us autonomy? So one thing that Katrina McKenzie says is there's something about...
By autonomy, you mean freedom in some specialist sense.
Yeah, so we could stipulate that as like a very baseline definition of autonomy. But what they want to say, or what Katrina McKenzie says in one sense, is these relationships help us to self-authorize. So in this sense, it helps us to authorize reality. So we recognize it as true. What we think happened, we can map onto reality and create sort of truth claims about that. I think friendship does that in a way. So when we get together and we are talking about the sexist thing that happened, but we're doubting ourselves and we're like, no, maybe I'm just in my head about it. You and I help each other come to the realization that no, a harm actually did happen. And I think there's something special about friendships or relationships more generally that allows that to happen. So that's sort of what I'm thinking. And then this, I think, crops up in the early modern period. Maybe could a story be told where we see similar things in the 70s with consciousness raising circles, things of the sort. So maybe there's a historical story to be told there.
Right. So then this seems cogent, but why focus then on the early modern stuff? Why talk about the history since that is your focus? Why not talk about contemporary stuff? Is there a reason that you think that doing this through the lens or through using the material of the early modern period is the best way to sort of build this house, as it were?
Yeah, good. I'm like secretly taking notes under the table. You're writing my project for me, so thank you. Yeah, I have two answers. My cop-out answer, I think the early modern period is cool as hell. It's awesome.
When is the early modern period again, also?
Yeah. Oh,
about?
Now you're really testing me. Somebody could fact check me on this. I want to say the 1600s to 1700s, in and around there.
Okay. And this is in philosophy. This is not in general.
Yeah, good. Because this is disputed. My partner studies English literature, and we often have debates on who is an early modern scholar.
Okay, sure.
So, yeah, the more maybe not cop-out answer, I think there's a lot of historical evidence in the early modern period suggesting that friendship has this special sort of power, political power, if we're going to be talking about autonomy, that maybe does crop up in periods before. I haven't explored those yet, but I think there is sufficient evidence in the early modern period. It's a starting point.
And where does this evidence show up exactly? What's the flavor of the material you're drawing on?
Yeah, good. So I'm looking at Margaret Cavendish.
And tell me about her.
Oh, she is so cool. An early modern woman writer. She was married to William Cavendish. They're both aristocrats, so they're very wealthy. But yeah, so she's writing a lot of different kinds of philosophy. She's writing plays, she's writing poems, she's writing stories.
As opposed to the normal treatise or something.
Yeah, as opposed to writing real philosophy. So it's quite interesting stuff to read. But yes, so she has, we could take her work, The Convent of Pleasure. So the whole idea in The Convent of Pleasure is you have women who are socially marginalized in the early modern period. What Cavendish does in the play is she puts them all in this little convent together. And they're kissing and they're hugging, as friends do. And in the convent, they're able to do philosophy, write poetry. They develop all of these skills that they otherwise weren't able to outside of the convent.
These are the women in the convent.
So it seems like there's something going on in the relationships that the women have to one another that provides them the power and capacity to do these things. So you see something similar in Mary Astell's work, where she sort of, again, suggests cloistering women. And so I think that provides a locus to look at what's going on when these women are cloistered together. You seem to have all these really, I don't want to call them superpowers, but yeah. So I think it provides good textual evidence as a starting point, but I'm open to that changing.
You're just mostly, okay, you're open to that changing. You're more concerned with the importance of friendship, of female friendships, it seems like. Is that than the history aspect? Is that right?
Yeah, I think I want to start with female friendships, but if you're looking at things like consciousness raising groups, which were incredibly important for Black feminists, you're also seeing something similar going on here. So I wonder how far this could be extended beyond gender.
Sure, sure. But it is the case, though, that philosophy of women is somehow your starting point or the lens through which you want to start this inquiry.
I think so. Unless I have a course next semester and I make a total radical change and suddenly I'm studying Kant, in which case,
Okay.
send help. Yeah.
But why women's philosophy in particular? Is it just because you're yourself a woman? What is it about women's concerns that makes you think that that's the way to start?
Yeah.
Is it some related maybe to what you were saying earlier about the alternate canon? Tell me about that.
Yeah. Women are pretty badass. So that's my cop out answer. Why women? I think there is an interesting story to be told that you might not otherwise get if you were looking at, say, relationships between men and women or men and men. So I think of something like, I think correct me if I'm wrong, might have been the medieval period, but women had these like stitch and bitch circles. They would get together and sew, and then they would sort of gossip. And in this way, it built relationships with each other. Very curious and interested about what's going on here. But I think this is something that was very unique to these relationships that women had with one another. That, again, you might not otherwise see in relationships that men have to one another because they're bad at gossip. But yes.
So Sarah, you've talked a bit about being a woman in philosophy, masculinist discipline, sure. I'm curious though, in a larger sense, do you think that there's anything in particular about the current sort of society milieu that impacts your work, specifically the fact that you're a woman in the current society where women's rights have certainly changed over the past century. But now some things are being called into question again, and there's a lot of uncertainty and questions of what direction should the culture head in? Who knows? What do you think this impacts your work at all?
So I think on a more personal level, it can really hurt your spirit a bit to see everything that is going on and taking 1,000,001 steps backwards.
You think the general direction is going backwards in some sense? What does that mean?
Yeah, no, I don't think I want to make any really big, bold claims, but I think it's a bit disheartening to watch the news every morning. So yeah, maybe I'll leave the personal stuff on that, but on a professional level, in some sense, I find myself I can question the legitimacy of my work when I sort of square it up with, okay, what is being talked about right now? What do the people want? I find maybe I can get a bit down on myself of like, is this really a fruitful project? Is this a legitimate project given, how embedded this is in focusing on the works of women? But I think the upshot of this, I was talking a bit earlier how community really means a lot to me. And I think specifically at McGill, there is so many folks working on this and interested in this that it helps to prop up the project. And knowing that folks do want to talk about this, that this is important, that friendship in some way or another does help us, be it through gender, through race, through class. I think knowing that there are folks here working on it helps me still believe in the project. So, yeah.
Where by working on it, by it you mean something like philosophy of women, women's issues?
Yeah, something as of or related to.
Especially in the early modern period?
Yeah, early modern period for sure. But I think even more broadly, we could say like, yeah, feminist philosophy.
So do you think then, or maybe you can discuss this, how do you think, so McGill has people who work on philosophy of women, feminism, whatever, both in the early modern period, but also, contemporary stuff. What do you think the difference is there? What do you think has changed in sort of, given your research, the sort of socioeconomic, role of being a woman from the early modern to now? How has it being a woman changed, do you think, as a position?
Ooh, maybe this is what I should write my thesis on. So you asked about the contemporary period and the early modern period. I'd say one's real philosophy and one's not. I'm just kidding. Yeah, I think certainly when you think about women intuitively, you'd be inclined to say that this has changed throughout the historical timeline. What I do want to say about this, though, is there is a story to be told from well before the early modern period until now and until tomorrow and until 10, 20, 100 years in the future. I think every part of that story is important to tell or to get the full picture. So I think we need to look at everything that's been going on, the discussions that are had around this, be it in the early modern period or right now, to understand what is the story, what's going on here. So I would say that we need both.
Well, yeah, and the story being the story of sort of the what is it like being a woman from then to now?
Yeah, I think there's one story to be told in that sense, but in regards to friendship and whatnot, I think the friendship question is asked. So we say, okay, friendship as a form of political resistance. There's this underlying question of what are you resisting? And I think that story has to be told by looking at the whole picture from the early modern period, from before then until now. So if we're looking at women, what are women resisting?
And what are women resisting?
Oh, high cost of groceries, rent. I think on a more serious note, there are ways. My sort of pitch for this is there are ways women are harmed in which men are not. And this exists in a multitude of ways. So I think if we take this very broad definition, we can sort of look at the specific ways that harm manifests. Write a whole project on all these different kinds of harms and how they show up. So I think being open to this idea that harm towards women occurs in so many different ways helps to maybe answer that a bit.
No, good.
Yeah.
Good. And so this is ultimately what you work on. Is this sort of the big picture question, what you really care about? Why work on sort of the resistance aspect of female friendships? What is the big picture sort of pre-philosophical, let's say, motivations that you bring as a person?
Yeah. What gets me up in the morning to do this? I think it's friends. And I want to use that very loosely. I think and maybe, you know what? I might even just say more broadly, it's the people that I have relationships with that not only get me up in the morning, but that motivate a project like this. They remind me that friends family, all other kinds of relationships that you might have in your life. Bring something to the table. And I think this sort of way of political resistance, and I think that is incredibly important to know how powerful friendship actually is, how powerful relationships actually are to us. It's all good and well to be like, yes, I have friends, I have family, and it's all lovely and, rainbows and sparkles, but there seems to be something even more powerful, even more moving about those relationships. What gets me up is trying to answer what that is. Friendships are all we got. Relationships are all we got at the end of the day.
And how have your friendships been since coming to McGill?
Who's my favorite friend, Dax?
Not what I was asking.
It's you.
Not what I was asking.
Yeah. No, good. Relationships at McGill. I think I was saying to you earlier how vibrant the McGill philosophy community is. I think everybody here welcomes you with open arms, which if you're from, I did my undergrad at St. FX, little X-ring representation. It's a very small school. And so
I've never heard of it.
Yeah, well, exactly. I think
Where is it?
Nova Scotia, Indigenous, Nova Scotia. Shout out to my family. There's all of maybe 5,000 people at the school. It's very small. And our philosophy department, ballpark number, graduated with maybe 7 or 8 students. So I think we had a really, really wonderful community there. But you come to somewhere like McGill, where that population not only doubles, but almost like quadruples might not even fit. So how do you find friendship? How do you find relationships in a city that is so big and large, in a department that has upwards of 40, 50 people? I don't think you have to do too much work because the McGill community is so wonderful. These folks welcome you in with open arms. And I think we have things like going to Thompson House on Wednesdays that motivate people to get together to form that community. And I think that's really, really beautiful. So the friendships, they're wonderful. They're amazing. Everybody has been so wonderful.
So that sounds great. I'm glad that you feel like you have friends at McGill.
I hope.
One hopes.
Yes.
I also know that you've recently gotten involved in student politics, sort of the community of friends, as Aristotle says.
Yes.
Could you tell me a bit about that? What do you do as a student politician? What is your role first?
Yeah, what is student politics? An excellent question. I'll start a bit by trying to sell myself. I've been involved in student governance for quite some time. I was quite involved in my undergrad in a role adjacent to it. I worked as like a mini student lawyer for folks who had issues with student conduct. I would sort of represent them on the part of the student and go to conduct meetings with them, which was a really interesting role to have. So I think what motivates me about student politics, and then I'll say a bit about what that was, is the very Aristotelian sense of politics as community, not so much as strong, fearless leader who is leading the pack, but how do we bring everybody together as a community? What can we do to better strengthen the bonds there? So I think when I think about student politics, this is sort of how I'm framing it, is what is the community that I have, so the McGill philosophy community, and my role in it as president, I see to work with not only others who are involved in the student governance, but also everybody in the philosophy department to see what can we do to build and continue building.
What is your role in the government?
Yeah, I am Madam President. I want to be humble in admitting I'm still sort of learning the ropes and what this entails. But what I see right now, all of the technical paper filling out stuff aside, but working with others on student governance. So we have Alex Carty, who's our lovely VP academic, Gabe Bidner, who's our lovely VP finance. Maybe we could look at doing things like weekly reading groups, certain social hangouts, doing philosophy outdoors, bringing it back to the polis.
So the role of the student government is mostly to sort of provide opportunities for social engagement to the PhDs. Is there any other role, like a legislative role?
Definitely. I think there's some liaisoning between the faculty and the graduate students. As far as I know, I think the undergraduate students also have somebody to liaison. So we have folks who are liaisoning. We have union representatives. We also have a wonderful social committee. We have folks organizing interdisciplinary workshops. We have a graduate, we could call it like a workshop where folks come in and just talk about things they're working on and get ideas from their peers. We have a equity committee. We have an environmental committee. We have the VP finance, VP academic. There is a number of different roles. We also have a wonderful TA coordinator position. So it's all of these working parts that come together to build that community.
And how do you feel to be a part of that, especially as the leader of this whole organization?
The fearless leader. I feel incredibly...
Are you fearless?
Oh, I'm actually deeply scared of the world. It's quite a scary place. Yeah, I feel incredibly lucky to be part of this and to also feel like I can call not only Montreal, but McGill home. I have a hard time placing my finger on what home is, but you know what, when you feel it? And I really, really want to continue working at building a strong community for McGill folks, for folks who are thinking about coming to McGill and knowing that they're going to be in good hands when they come here.
Just to round off, are you excited to lead McGill, to be head of the PhD students in philosophy?
Vive McGill! Vive la McGill!
Okay, well, thank you for talking to me today, Sarah. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule as president of the McGill PhDs to come here. I'm Dax Avery Hamouth. I'm a PhD in philosophy of logic at McGill, and this is...
I am Sarah. I am also a PhD student studying friendship at McGill. Thank you for having me, Dax, and thank you for the thoughtful questions.
Cheers.